Okay, so most of you should know me. I know everybody here, so um, my name is Melissa Jacqueline. I'm with Lantern Realty, and I work with buyers and sellers just like the rest of you, but I also do compliance for Lantern Realty. So that means when you are working with a client, you are supposed to be submitting your documents. We use Dotloop. You can use a different program. You may have clients who only sign in pen because they don't do email or they don't do anything that has to do with electronics, and that's okay. The end result needs to be that those documents, however you have them, are in Dotloop and submitted. It's best to do it as you get things signed and completed. Just submit them as you go. Makes it a lot easier. It's easier to catch things. If a signature is missing or a document's missing, it's so much easier to do it in the beginning or as you're going versus after you've hit the closing table. So what we're going to do is we'll start from the beginning. Don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. What we're going to do here is we're at the beginning. So I'm going to hide this little screen so I can see all of mine. Can everybody see my Dotloop? Can you?
I can see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Yes.
I'm hoping everybody. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I have you guys hidden. So if you're nodding your head, I have no idea. So this is one of my personal loops, just so everybody doesn't see everything else that's going out there. So your loop should look similar to this, where it's lantern, it's blue, it's going to have your name on it. These right here are my individual loops. You can scroll and see you have a bunch more. Some of you may have a similar setting. You can go over to this little grid and you can change the view to whatever you prefer. So if you go to list view, it's like this, right? And then if you go to compact, it looks a little bit more like your email would when it comes in. It's just, those are the views. Use whatever is comfortable to you. It doesn't matter because when you submit your documents, I'm going to see them in the grid layout that I prefer. So I just like this because for me, I don't see as many. So it's not as overwhelming. But again, however you want, doesn't matter, but that's how you can change it, is over there to the side. You can sort your loops. I have by creation date right now, but you can tell it to keep them up front by the most recently updated one. You can see transaction price, listed date, closing date. So there's a lot of different things. I just do creation date. Doesn't matter. Like I said, whatever is your preference. So one of the things you're going to notice is you can archive your loops, which means, so in Dotloop, you cannot delete a document. You cannot delete a loop, but you can hide it so you don't have to look at it. If you go to filters, it brings up other options. So right now I have it set to hide archived. Okay. If you have a transaction that ended up not going anywhere and you don't want to look at the loop anymore, or if you had a transaction, you closed, you're done with it, you don't need to worry about it anymore, you can archive those. And then if you just don't want them out there to where you have to look at them all the time or weed through them to get to your other loops, you can tell it to hide archived documents. If you need to call them back because you need to get into it or you need to pull a document that was in it or whatever, then just simply hit only archived and then hit apply, and it's going to show you everything you archived. So you can go back through, you can find what you're looking for. You have another option to show you all. And if you keep your setting like that, then you can see everything that's archived and everything that's not been archived. So for this purpose, we're just going to hide archives so it's not so messy. There are other options. These only work as well as you keep up with your loop. So if you properly label all of your loops, and then you want it to show you purchases only, then you can click purchase, hit apply, and it's going to show you ones that say that when you go over to the side, say purchase. But if you're not always labeling them, then that's not going to help you find what you're looking for. So, and that is just a quick rundown on that. Now, if you need to create a loop for whatever reason, like if you are going to be working with somebody who could potentially be a client, first thing you should do is get a working with real estate agent signed. So when you do that, you need to put that somewhere, because even if you never see that person again, they decide to work with somebody else, they decide they're not really going to sell, or they're not really going to buy, or whatever the purpose, you have to have that document. If the real estate commission ever comes asking for it, you have to have it. You don't want to lose that. So even if you have to create a loop with that client's name and just put that working with real estate in there, you know, you can do that, and then you can archive it so you don't have to look at it, but you know it's there, it's safe. It'll always be able to be retrieved if needed. So, but anyways, so if we are going to set up a loop for a client, or I do suggest, if you haven't had any transactions, I do suggest you create a loop, like a sample loop. Practice on your house, your cousin's house, your parents' house, your siblings, whatever, and then just practice doing your research work, practice filling out the forms, getting familiar with Dotloop and stuff like that, so that when you are working with a client, you feel more confident with it and more comfortable. But we're just going to make up a loop. So we're going to hit add loop. When you do that, it's going to ask you for a property address or MLS number. You don't have to do that. Really, what it's telling you, as you can see right here, is the loop name. What are you going to name it? So if you're working with a buyer, you won't necessarily have a property address. You're not really going to have an MLS number. And that's okay. That's more of a suggestion, because what it'll do once you start typing one of those in, it'll try to search for that property address or that MLS number. But we're not concerned with this. I only think I have a few generic loops. So we're going to change this one. So see how it's, as I start to type, it's automatically trying to figure out what I'm looking for. I'm not concerned with any of those. If you do choose one of those, what happens is when that loop is created, this information transfers. I don't know who Nicholas Center is, but he's going to be in my loop as the listing agent, and I don't want him there. I have accidentally just gone on and hit, whatever, and accidentally selected it. It's no big deal. You just go in and delete all the information. It just adds a little bit of extra time. So, but today we are going to work with Jane Buyer, and I'm not interested in any of those. So I've got my name, and you can edit that. So what you put on here is not set in stone. You can change your loop name as many times as you feel like it. So today we're starting with Jane Buyer because that's who I have, and I don't know what property she's going to be purchasing or anything else. So from here, you can hit continue down here in the bottom right. If you're in a hurry and you're familiar with stuff, I just hit enter. Did somebody say something? No, not really. Okay. So number 2, it wants you to choose a template. Now it's going to ask you to. You do not have to. You can do it if you want to. There are a few templates in here. This one in the middle, y'all are not going to use it. That is just what it says, agent onboarding. So none of those documents matter. I don't even know if you have, well, if I have access to it on my personal one, you do too. So, but that's going to get you nothing that you want. So the buying template and the listing template, those are the two that you might use. Those templates have the most common documents that you would probably need during a transaction. If you choose one of those, the buying template, for example, it's going to automatically load documents to your loop. It'll automatically load a working with real estate. It'll automatically load a buyer agency agreement. It should automatically load the sample documents because whether you realize it or not, or forgot or not, you do have to supply sample documents to your clients, right? A sample offer to purchase, a sample professional services disclosure, the one that talks about the home inspections, stuff like this. So we automatically have those in a folder for you. And I think our affiliated business disclosures in there, stuff like that. So if you select that, it's going to put those in your loop. You can use them. Whatever you're not going to use, you can archive out of it. Listing template, it's very similar, right? It's the listing agreement, working with real estate, your property disclosures, mineral oil and gas, things you would need when you're going to list a property. So that being said, the listing template is just for residential. It's not the commercial listing agreement. It's not vacant land or anything else. If you don't think you're going to need those, or you want to pick and choose your documents that you put in your folder and your loop, then just don't choose the template folder. You can hit enter, or you can go to the bottom and hit continue. Those folders are set up because most of the documents that are in them, we're going to ask that you have filled out and submitted. Obviously, all of them don't apply. And there may be other documents that do apply that are not in those folders. That's fine. But those are some of the main documents that you are really supposed to have. You are supposed to go over with your client and so on. You can upload a photo. Some people do, some people don't. You may not even have a photo yet to upload, and that's okay. And it's typically a photo of the property that you're uploading. But you can see in my loops, I don't ever upload photos. So I'm just going to hit enter, or you can hit continue. And this is what my loop's going to look like for now. And from this point, you have different ways to get into it. You can click on it, see the little hand. You can hit view loop, or I just hit enter. I like the enter button, so it's just easier. I can just zoom right through. So we have Jane Buyer. Select a transaction type. So when you go up here, you should label these just so it's a little bit more organized for you. But when you select your transaction type, so you have purchase, listing for sale, lease, real estate, other. She's a buyer, so I'm going to hit purchase. It wants to know the status of my loop, which one applies. Well, right now we're pre-offer because we haven't offered anything. If you want to leave it blank, you can leave it blank. That's up to you. So it automatically gives you a folder, an empty folder, because I did not select templates. So I have an empty folder. I don't like it to just say folder. That's me. You all can have 5 in there that all say folder if you want. I'm going to label mine. So I'm going to come over to these little drop down dots, and I'm going to tell it to rename it. And I'm just keep it pretty straightforward. You can name it however you want. And I hit enter. So buyer docs. At this point, I'm going to add a document. So I'm going to go over here where it says add a document, and it's giving me options. So I've got 3 options to choose from. Dotloop will only let you upload a PDF copy of something, a PDF version. So if you were trying to upload anything else and it's never showing up, it's because it's not a PDF. So just keep that in mind. So you have options. If I have a file saved to my computer, then I'm going to hit browse. When I hit browse, it's going to open my folder on my computer, and it's going to let me select wherever I have my document stored. And as long as it's a PDF, it's fine. I just click it, tell it to open it, and it'll download it to Dotloop for me. Email. If you have a PDF attachment in an email, then you can choose email. When you do that, it pops up this really, really long email address. All these little numbers and letters and everything tell it that when it imports it to put it into this loop and into this specific folder. So if you have multiple folders, it's going to drop it in the one that you've selected. And it's easy. You just copy to clipboard, then you go into your email and paste this where you would type in a regular email address where you're going to send an email to. Just paste that in there and then hit send. It doesn't matter what the rest of the content is of the email. It will only import the PDF. So, and then the third one is templates. So I click templates and you're going to see a stack of templates. These should automatically be in your Dotloop. You can create your own individual ones, but for now, these are the ones that kind of come with it. So we have buyer docs. So if I click that, anything you put in here is going to be in here. I don't ever use this profile, so mine doesn't have anything, but you can create your own personal ones and upload specific. I don't need Asheville because I'm not in Asheville, so I'm not worried about that. If I need a Dotloop checklist, we have them in here. This gives you an idea of the documents you need. I refer back to it on my personal transactions, just to make sure I'm not forgetting to put anything in the loop that needs to be in there. There is a referral folder. So if you click on that, it has the documents you would need if you are doing a referral. So there's the W-9 in here. There's a Dotloop checklist for referrals to give you an idea of what should be in your loop. There are different referral agreements. So we have your basic one for residential. There's a referral agreement in here if you're doing a commercial deal. And if you don't know commercial and you've never done commercial and you don't have an agent who's going to hold your hand through the commercial, it is probably best to refer that out to somebody who's a little bit more of an expert in commercial or has more practice with it. Commercial is different from residential. Not everything's the same. So it's best to either get somebody who will help you and work the deal with you or just refer it. So if you do, there is a referral agreement in here for that. There's also a referral agreement in here. If you refer your client to a builder, you can fill this out and send that to them and talk to them about the builder paying you a referral fee. So we've created the buyer folders, just like the buyer template and the listing template. If you don't want to automatically upload all those, you can come over to the buyer folder. And most of those documents are in the buyer folder as well. So you can come through and pick and choose the documents you want. So unless they filled out a work with real estate by pen, and if they're going to do it electronically, then you can select whatever you want. You can select as many at a time. We're going to do a Dotloop checklist for buyers and working with real estate. These 10 commandments, this is not required. This just tells your buyer that they should not do certain things while they're trying to buy the house. Like, don't go open a line of credit, don't change banks, don't change jobs, just different stuff like that. So it just kind of has a list for them to follow up on, because a lot of them think they can go out and open up a line of credit at rooms to go and get all their furniture ordered for the house that they haven't even closed on yet. And depending on their debt to income and everything else that follows in with that, they may have just disqualified themselves from being able to purchase a house. So kind of has that stuff in it. There's a buyer agency agreement. You will need that. If you don't have one signed up front, you at least have to have one signed before you write up an offer and submit an offer. Overview standards of contracts. We're going to click on that because that is a good document. We want to make sure our client has that. That's going to explain the offer to purchase a little bit better, what it means, how they know they're under contract, what due diligence is, earnest money, it just kind of breaks everything down a little bit easier for them to understand. Let's see. So there's a few things in there. Professional services disclosure, professional services disclosure. You should, or you need to have this if you are working with a buyer, not should. You need to have a professional services disclosure filled out properly and completely and initialed and signed by your buyer by closing date. Some of the stuff you won't have filled in until closing or closer to closing, and that's okay. You can do that at that point, but they need to at least see the sample version, because that's going to let them know all the different services they could have done during the process from going under contract to closing. You don't want to forget to tell them that they should have their septic inspection done and them have no idea because they've never maybe had a septic tank, or this is the first time buying a house and they don't know all these things. Well, on the professional services disclosure, it talks about a septic inspection. So that's a reminder for them and for you to say, we need to look at doing this. And you want to protect yourself and you want to protect your client. So you really should fill these out properly. Don't just initial waive and select, put the details in there, who the septic inspector was that came out, who asked for them, who ordered it, stuff like that. So don't take any shortcuts with real estate, because it's your license and you worked hard for it and you want to keep it, and you don't want to go explain yourself to Raleigh. You don't want to have to pay for fines. You don't want to have to buy somebody,
compensate them.
you don't want to compensate people. It's just best to do it properly from the beginning. But the sample documents are in here as well. You are supposed to be giving your clients the sample professional services, the sample offer to purchase. Not required, but you should give them a copy of the radon pamphlet and radon fact sheet. It's not a very expensive test. It's a very important test. Questions and answers on home inspections. This is the other one that the offer to purchase suggests you give them. And if you check those boxes and they initial thinking they received it and they never did, I mean, you're not doing a good job. Basically what it is. And then there's protect your family from lead in your home. So if the home is built prior to 1978, you should be giving them this little pamphlet as well. And so all you do is you just come down and tell it copy on all the little documents, and it just uploaded them for us. So let me see. Okay, so I pulled these from the buyer documents. If I look at this and say, oh, there's another document I needed, I forgot, then I'm just going to go to add document, bounce back over to templates, because this is where I forgot my document. And I'm going to look through here and try to figure out what it is, right? Probably not in the listing folder. Probably not coming soon. By the way, if you do a coming soon listing, you need to fill out the Canopy's MLS coming soon form. They just updated it. Well, they've just updated it in February. We have the new version in here, but you need to read it. You need to explain it to your seller. You need to fill it out properly. You need to have your BIC sign it. There's a place on the document. It's the last signature, and it is the listing agent's member participant. If it says member participant, what they are looking for is your BIC, your broker in charge, to sign it. That's the member participant. So it's very important that you have them sign it. If you just send it to them in Dotloop for them to sign, please follow up with a text, a phone call, or something that just says, hey, I have this coming soon. I just sent it to you to sign. Please let me know you got it, because it is your job to follow up to make sure that they signed it. Because if you send it out and it could get lost in their email, they might not realize that you've even sent it. But you need to follow up and make sure everything's being signed like it should be. Same thing with your clients. If you send them something to sign, please follow up and make sure they signed it. Don't assume it got signed. So if you are doing documents electronically, the very first thing in real estate when you're working with somebody that you are supposed to have signed is the working with real estate form. So if you're not doing it in person and you're doing it electronically, please make sure that you have explained to your client on the phone or in person what that brochure is, what that means, what each of those sections means. and make sure you've got it signed. So if you've explained it and then you say, I'm going to send it to you electronically, we've already gone over it or whatever, when you send it out to them, maybe just kind of reiterate that a little bit in the message box that goes out to them that says, this is the working real estate we went over, you know, this morning or whatever. Let them know if they have any questions to reach out to you, please sign it. And you need to go in and you need to make sure that they have electronically signed that before you send them the listing agreement to sign or the buyer agency agreement to sign. It has to be the number one thing. So don't send them a stack of documents at the same time to electronically sign, because they may just scroll past some of those really important ones and start signing other stuff like an offer to purchase. And they may not ever go back and sign the working with real estate or the buyer agency agreement. And if you have to go to Raleigh and they ask about it, you can't just say, well, they didn't sign it, I sent it to them. It's your job to make sure they understand it. And it's your job to make sure these things are getting signed in the proper order. Raleigh's not going to care that you sent it to them and they didn't sign it. Raleigh's going to care that you didn't follow up and make sure it was done correctly. So please keep that in mind. Anyway, so coming soon is one of those things. There's dates on it. Those dates need to line up with the dates in your listing agreement. If you're uncertain, just reach out to me or Paula or Dina or Chris, just to make sure, you know, you're getting those dates in there correctly. So we have all these other folders. So the 2022-2023 NCR interactive documents, these are updated every July for the most recent form, because that's when all of our forms get updated. Sometimes there are no changes or no noticeable changes. Sometimes there are significant changes. Doesn't matter. Every July, you need to go in here and start using the most recent updated forms. Okay, they give you a little bit of a grace period. It's not much, but it's a bad habit to think, well, I still have this much grace period. And then, you know, then you run out of grace period before you know it. So we're going to click on that. If you click on this little folder right here and a box pops up, it's probably going to ask you for your NRDS number. And y'all, you may have it written down. I've only ever met one agent who had it memorized. I don't have mine memorized by all means. So you have it written down, but you can access it by logging into the North Carolina Realtor website or the NAR website. Your NRDS number is connected to your name there. But if it stops you, it is just because it is trying to verify that you are a realtor, that you are allowed to access these real estate forms. I believe when they update in July, it will stop you at that point the first time you go to get into them. And then we have sample documents. So we're going to click on these. This is going to have just about every real estate form in it. There are, if you go to the North Carolina Realtor Association website, you will find Spanish versions as well. So, but you're just you can scroll through and find what you want. Something to keep in mind, these, see how they're numbered? So we're in the 2s. These are typically your residential real estate forms. So as you scroll through, let's see, you start getting up further, it's the 400s. You'll notice they all talk about property management. Most of the time, you're really not going to need anything in there. If you get into the 5s, these should be your commercial. Yep. So in your commercial documents, they are different and they are going to look different as well. Working with real estate should look pretty much the same. But if you pull a 500 and you're not doing a commercial transaction, you need to go get the proper form. The easiest or quickest way to tell is when you open a commercial document, it will say commercial on it. It has a little emblem. So, but that's how those are labeled. So you can quickly scroll to what you need. You can type it up in the search, but you have to kind of know like this. If you're looking for an interest-bearing trust account, you're going to have to type interest-bearing, because I think if you just type trust, oh, it actually shows up. So sometimes you get lucky and it pulls it, and other times it's going to tell you it can't find what you're looking for, even if you know that's in the title. So hopefully they're getting better at that. Okay. So when you do these, some of these will pre-fill for you. The first time you open it, it will try to pre-fill it. So if you are working with a client, and this one, our buyer is Jane Buyer. So we're going to go in here and we're going to add our clients. You will automatically show up. Admin will automatically show up. You don't ever have to add any admin. You don't have to add me. The only time you have to do that is if one of us is working with you and helping you, and we're going to be in and out, you know, maybe co-listing or working with a buyer or anything like that. But these will automatically show up. I need to assign my title. That way, when I open up a document, it knows where to put me. I'm not none. I'm more important than that. Today, I'm a buying agent. So I'm going to select my role. And then we need to add Jane. So I'm going to add Jane. I don't have an email address for Jane today. That's okay. But she has a role also. It needs to know who she is or what she is. And she today is our buyer. You can see if you scroll, there's a few other options. So if you do add your inspector or your insurance representative or whomever, most of those titles are in here. If you do not have, or you do not see the title of the person you're adding, you can just select other. It's pretty good filler. So she's a buyer. So I've just selected buyer. You can put as much or as little information in here as you want. So with a buyer agency agreement, you can fill in all this information and it should pre-fill that in the buyer agency agreement for you. But you have to watch when you fill out an offer to purchase. If you have any of this information in here, the offer to purchase typically pre-fills that back on, is it page 13, I think, towards the back where it has each client's name and email and address and stuff, it will pre-fill it there. You can do what you want. I prefer to not give my clients email, phone number, address, anything to the other party. So if you do that, just double check the form and just delete it out of the offer if it does that. You do not want your buyer and your seller talking. And you really don't want your buyer contacting the listing agent. You should be there. You should be answering the questions. Occasionally, people make deals or whatever without you realizing it. So it's best just to not share. I think it's best just not to share contact information. So if I had her email address, I would put it in here. She's added as a person, add her. And she's there and we're not worried about an email right now. This is just so you can see when you add her. The first time I open the document, well, we're going to start up here with our checklist. You can put your name once you go under contract, or if you have a listing, you can put that information up here, MLS number, address. So this is a checklist. The titles here, these are just how I title my folders. You can do it how you want. But I do a folder that I title buyer docs, just like I did. And this is the documents that I try to make sure I have in there. You do it how you want. I will not check this little box until I've opened up my working with real estate brochure or form and made sure that my information is on it and that my client has signed it and that I have checked at least one or more of the little boxes on it. Once I've double checked that is complete and accurate, then I go in and I check the little box. Oh, where do we go? Right there. That's That's how I personally do it, to make sure that that document is complete as it's supposed to be, and that it's in there. So, because I may have it and they may have signed in pen and it may be in a folder in my computer and I just may have forgot to upload it to Dotloop. So again, that reminds me to go double check. Don't assume that I have it in there, even though I know I have it. It's for me to double check and make sure, yes, it is in there. And yes, it is complete. Everything is on there as it should be. So, and I do that with all these documents. Professional services disclosure, I don't do that until later. So I don't usually keep it in here, but I mean, you can see what I'm talking about. Once we submit an offer, I have another folder that just says offer documents. But once that becomes a contract, I just retitle my folder to under contract docs. And then this gives me a rundown of typically what forms I should have in there. Obviously starting with the offer to purchase, which will be a contract as soon as it's signed. Copies of the earnest money due diligence check, or if it was a wire transfer. This probably has to be updated because I don't think it's page 13 anymore. But the arm on the back where they sign to acknowledge they've received the earnest money, due diligence money, whichever disclosures apply, lead-based paint, it's in here, but obviously it doesn't always apply, and that's okay. It's just as a reminder that if it applies, do I have it in here? Is it completed? So this right here where it says agent full MLS under contract info sheet. So that means when you go into the MLS and you pull up the property and you're looking at all the information on the property, I go up to the top and I select that property. Then I go down in the MLS and I tell it that I want to print it. And I do a print to PDF so that I have all that listing information. And when I do that, I do print the page that has the property boundaries. It's got the flood map. I go ahead and tell it to do it with the full photos as well. You never know when you're going to need that information. I do it if I remember. I get the active one before going under contract as well, because sometimes the information changes after it goes under contract. I have had that done personally in a transaction where the agent changed some of the information and I noticed it after the fact. So just kind of, if you can remember to get the active one, get the active one. But put those in here. And if you're a listing agent, you definitely want to do it, because if you have it in here and we pull it up and, we see some of the information could be questionable, or if I see wording in there that can get you in trouble with MLS, if I see it, I will point it out. But go ahead and just run down. This is just a general list. Like I said, if there's permits, survey, anything, put it in here. Copy of the current deed, find the deed. This is part of doing your homework also. Don't assume the listing agent did it correctly. Do that research yourself, because sometimes you'll find stuff that they should have already had in there, but did not for whatever reason. So but just kind of go through here. This tells you what you should have in here. Measurement of the house, because guess what? You can't use tax records. You either measure it yourself and draw your own little sketch and have your numbers and use that for your square footage, or you hire a professional. But you cannot just pull it off of tax records. Don't pull it off a prior listing either, because that agent, you don't know where they got their measurements, or if they did their math properly, or whatever, or if maybe changes were done to the house since then. And now it measures differently. But go ahead and put everything in here. Highly suggested copies of email or text communications between you and your client, or between you and the other agent, or you and the attorney, or whatever. It's highly suggested that you keep copies in here as well. Sometimes you might need it, might help you out. So, and then we have one for closing documents. Signed closing disclosures, statements, HUDs. Put the signed copies in here. That lets us know that it is correct. It is done. It is closed. It's in your best interest to get a copy of the new deed with your client's name, or if you're the seller's agent, with the new buyer's name, just to make sure it kind of looks correct. and just get it in there. But as you do each set of documents, go ahead and submit them for review. Let me back out of here. It's probably going to ask if I want to save it because I messed with it. Nope, it did not. Okay. So working with buyer's agents, when we click on this, it wants to autofill. So right now, this is what it's showing me. But if I realize Jane's married and I'm talking to her husband as well, and he's going to be a buyer, he's not in here, it's no big deal. I can hit add person and do the same thing, right? Put John Buyer in there, his email address, and it'll move on. Buyer's agent. So right here is what it's got. It's got my license number. If all this looks fantastic, then I hit autofill. And when I come into here, it's all set and ready for me. So one of the things that I do go over here, see how it says Jane, there's no other buyer and it says buyer sign here. I will click on that and select no one, because occasionally your client can go over there and sign there as well. Then you have your client signing or initialing where it's not necessary. So unless they're talking to you, you're on the phone or whatever, you need to go over your forms before just sending them out blindly. You are supposed to as an agent. So hopefully I've already talked to her about it, or I'm on the phone with her and we're talking about it as we go through. You should, these are, if you read, it says that may apply. So when you're talking to somebody, you don't know that they're actually going to work with you, and you are going to be their buyer's agent, but that's your intent. And at some point that may apply, having a buyer's agency with them. So you're going to go over it and you're going to click that because that may apply. That's probably your goal. So unless you're working with a unrepresented buyer, which is not common, that's typically one box that's not checked. But you're going to go through dual agency. Lantern Realty does do dual agency. There are many occasions where our agents have cross sells. So you're going to go through here. This may apply. A lot of times it does. Lantern offers dual agency. So we're going to check that box. At this point, designated dual agency may or may not apply. Depends on what you choose to do. If you do not practice dual agency and you will only represent your client and you know that will be the case, period, then you can select that. It says it may apply. And that's pretty much how you go through. Please don't have all these blank, because I mean, your intentions are to work with them. You can rename these documents also, which I always shorten mine. You can rename it whatever you want. Keep in mind when you send the document out, people are going to see what you've named it. So, but you also want it to be something you can identify what the document is in your loop, because nobody likes to open their loop and see 20 documents and they're not name specific. They're whatever numbers and letters assigned to it when you scanned it in, for example, and you don't know what the document is. It just saves time to label it properly. So I'm going to save. If I was ready to send it to her, I'm going to hit share. And so when I hit share, it says, who am I sharing it with? Well, I need to share it with Jane because she needs to sign it. Right now, it's saying I don't have an email address for her. If I did not have it yet, this is the point where I'm going to get her email address and add it. This is, you need to pay attention to this over here on the side where it says can sign. If you look at the drop-down box, you have a few different options. Very, very rarely is it can edit in private. Okay, very rarely. So if it's something like, if it's disclosures, you cannot fill out their disclosures. By the way, you cannot fill out a residential property disclosure, mineral oil and gas, nothing. Okay, your clients are supposed to do that. It says that on the documents. They teach you that in school, whether or not you remembered it or not. They mentioned it in your pre-licensing and your post-licensing. You cannot fill those out. Your client has to do that. So if you are sending those documents electronically, you would choose can fill in and sign. That allows them to go in and and fill in those documents, put the check boxes, type stuff in or whatever. And that's okay. Most of the time, they're either going to be allowed to sign a document or to only look at it. So in this case, we want her to sign the working with real estate. So we're going to hit sign. So look at that, because sometimes it pre-fills it according to what it just thinks you might want, and it may not be the case. So check that. You can send them a PDF copy as well. I don't really want her to open the PDF copy yet. I'll send her another copy after she signs it. I don't want any confusion having her click on the wrong things. I just want her to sign it. So I'm going to hit can sign, and then I'm going to hit share. I also have the option right here to enter a custom message. And this is where I would just remind her what the document is. Anything that we went over, I'm just going to kind of break that down. Remind her when we discussed it, basically what it's about. Remind her that she can ask me if she has any questions, to review the document first before signing it. I'm going to have all that verbiage in there. If it's an offer to purchase, I also let them know, here's the offer to sign that we discussed. It should all be the terms that we discussed. Please review it. If it looks correct, then sign it. And I will also do the breakdown. Right now I have the offer price of this, the due diligence of this, earnest money, whatever, just kind of as a reminder, because some people will review the documents before they sign. Other people would just trust you and just blindly sign or initial wherever you tell them. So I just make sure I put that in there, whether or not they read it. I mean, I can't help that, but at least I'm just trying to cover myself. I can't send that because I don't have her information in there. And it's going to ask you again, this is going to prompt you a few times for different things. If I did not save that document first, it's going to first ask me if I want to save it. Always stop and read the box. You may assume it's just going to say whatever. You may hit no or yes automatically, but just read it, because it's either going to say share or it's going to say save. And you just, if that says save and you hadn't saved, if it says, do you want to save it first? That means you edited it. You better hit yes, because if you hit no, because you assumed it was going to ask if you want to share it and you hit no, everything you just did is gone. So if you just sat there and filled out an offer to purchase, all those pages, all that information, and then you just were in a rush and you didn't stop to notice that it said save and you told it no because you thought it said share, you just lost all that work you just did. You have to go in and retype it all. So just slow down long enough to read it. So no, I don't want to share it. Buyer agency is going to do the same thing. Hit buyer agency. And here it's going to ask for any additional information. It is pre-filling my information. So whatever firm, whatever location you're connected with, that should be the address that's here. I'm connected with Kannapolis office, Kannapolis address, right? We are on West Avenue. Our old address was Main Street. Some people, I don't know why, but it still pulls up as Main Street for Kannapolis. That's not correct. We are not Suite B, so that should not be anywhere on here. Just double check and make sure the information is saved. Just take an extra 2 seconds to make sure the information looks correct. If you are a Salisbury agent, fantastic. Make sure it says 105. What is that? North Main Street, Suite B, Salisbury. Just make sure that looks correct. License number, make sure your license number is on here. It's got her name. I don't have her other information, but if I had her address, phone number, email, whatever, it would be in here, and that's okay for your buyer agency. Then I'm gonna hit autofill, and it saves you a little bit of writing. Most commonly missed, the date up at the top right corner on the buyer agency. It wants a date. So that's the date we're entering into the agreement. So please make sure you don't miss that date. And then you're just clicking, right? What is it? General location. Just put something, just don't put North Carolina, right? Because probably your client is not looking for something from Bryson City to Wilmington. They are probably more specific to Rowan or Cabarrus County, or they may be more specific to Salisbury or Salisbury and surrounding areas. So just kind of put something like that in there. Term of agreement, just read your boxes. Just read your boxes. Term of agreement, and it's probably going to be today because this is when you're signing it. So get your date. So you have two different check boxes. These are two different check boxes. Typically, only one of these applies. So just look at it really quickly. This is for anybody who is purchasing a single property, right? So you're going to check that box. You're going to choose the expiration date. Discuss that with your client, whether you do them for a year at a time, whether you do them for 3 months, 6 months at a time, whatever, just let them know, hey, here's what I typically do. Let them know that if either one of you decide you don't want to work together anymore, not a big deal. You can sign a termination. But just talk about that date, get a date in here. If they are going to buy more than one property, Nellie, you have a question?
Good morning. Yes, I do.
Okay.
So if you guys agree to do a termination, like have them signed, what happens after that? Do you have to let your BIC know, or just nothing happens?
Yeah, especially if you're provisional, let your broker in charge know, let them sign the termination. Yeah, there is a termination of agency agreement, and you're just filling out that, the type of form. It should ask you, I believe, what form it is. And then there's a place for you to sign and a place for your client to sign. But again, if you're newer or if you're a provisional broker, let your BIC know, we're signing a termination. Can you sign it, please? And they'll go in and they'll look at it, and they may talk to you about it. They may want to talk to your client as well, just to kind of see why everybody wants to terminate. And it could be you just have a buyer that you just cannot handle working with anymore, or they may feel the same about you. Or it could be their circumstances have changed. They're just not going to be able to buy, right? Or maybe they decided to move to South Carolina instead, whatever the case may be. Just let the BIC know, let them know that you have it to sign. So, and that's really that's all you have to do. You're welcome. If it is a listing and your client wants to terminate the listing before your expiration date, talk to your broker in charge. There is a termination agreement as well, but because it's a listing and it's on MLS, the only person that can withdraw that listing from the MLS is your BIC. So your BIC has to be involved because they have to know to go in and withdraw it. And there's two different types of withdrawals from MLS. There's temporarily withdrawal, which you can do because maybe your client wants to finish painting, or they have a roofer coming in and you want to temporarily withdraw it while that's being done, and then you're going to put it back on the market. That's one thing. But if this is terminated, no more, it needs to go, your BIC has to permanently withdraw it. So there are differences. Just if winning question, just talk to your BIC about that. Yeah. So, but if you have a client who's purchasing more than one, maybe you're working with an investor and over the next year, they plan on purchasing 2 or 3 homes, for example, then you can select this checkbox, right? And it tells you right there, more than one property. If they're going to buy more than one, that way you're not constantly signing buyer agency agreements. So and you can have your termination date. You're going to work with them until X time. And then you can sign a renewal. If that time's coming up, you can get the agency renewal form and just sign that, so you don't have to fill this out again. But if you cross over that July date when the new forms come out, don't just sign a agency renewal. Go ahead and use the new buyer agency agreement for July of 2023. So most people don't charge fees, but so just kind of read through it. It pre-fills everything. Again, I'm going to go over here, and I don't want Jane's signature on here twice, just in case. So I'm going to sign that to nobody, so she's not going to go over there. Please, when you send these out, if you have your clients sign them first, please remember to go back in and sign it afterwards. If you are an agent who signs them first before sending them out to your client to sign, please remember to go back in, follow up, make sure your client has signed every page or initialed every page and then signed the last page. Just whichever way you do it, make yourself a note or something that reminds you to go back in and make sure you have signed it and your client has. So I mean, it's nice. It pre-fills out most things. Obviously, there's some things that are not. Please read this section. Make sure you understand it. Don't let your client sign here and here. It says or. So I don't want Jane to accidentally sign down there. So I'm going to remove where it says buyer. Sometimes we get these and everything is initialed, and that's not how that works. Read through it, understand it. It is, it's important you understand it so you can explain it to your client. But if it is going to be exclusive representation, that means that they do not want Lantern to be a dual agency situation. So if you're working with a buyer who wants exclusive representation, that means they are not going to look at any Lantern Realty listings. They are not going to be submitting any offers on any Lantern Realty listings. So please make sure you understand that and make sure your client understands that. So, and then make sure, and if that's how they want it, that's fine. They can initial here. Just don't have them initial up here because it says or. Oh, here's something while we're on it. I know this is not really a forms class, but this is something that I see a lot. It says dual agency compensation. So if you're the buyer's agent, you really don't know what any other listing agent has for an agreement between them and their seller. And I get that, you know, and you can just, this is talking about the firm, but you know, you can put whatever, you can put 6%. That's typical. Sometimes people, but some people have agreements for 5%, 4%, 5.5%, 7%, whatever. You don't really know what it is. You can put 5 or 6%. That's fine. That's not the important one though. I missed it. Let me roll back up. Did I miss it? Yeah. So on page 1, where it says compensation of firm, most people don't collect a retainer fee. You can, if you have a buyer who will pay you a retainer fee, then that's great. Most people don't do it. Occasionally I see it. It's between you and your client. If you do collect a retainer fee from them, make sure you talk to them about whether or not, if they pay you $300 retainer fee, make sure you talk to them about whether or not they'll get credit for that at closing. Some people do it just because they're driving all over the place, and if the buyer does not close on a property, they want to make sure they've at least been compensated for their time. So some people will do it at that point. Some people do it and don't credit that towards any purchase, just because that's just the arrangement they have worked out. So that's between you and your client. Most agents don't collect it because we know that's the nature of our job. But whatever. But this important one right here, buyer agrees that firm's fee for services shall be in the amount of. So in North Carolina, typically the seller's side, the listing side, pays our commission. Typically, not always. Or they may offer 1% or $500 or whatever. And if you are a provisional broker or a more inexperienced agent that has less than 4 transactions, Lantern does not want your fee to go less than 2.5%. Outside of that, you know, whatever you feel is comfortable. But if you go over here and you put seller to pay or listing agent, or per MLS. If you put any of that stuff in here and you leave it like that, and you find a property for your buyer and they're either offering nothing for buyer agency compensation or $1, which we've been seeing show up in MLS, or maybe only 1%, and that's not acceptable to you. You have a certain amount that you expect. It doesn't matter if you put per MLS or you put listing agent, listing firm, seller to pay, anything like that, and you don't put a percentage or a dollar amount in here. Basically, what you're doing is you may be working for free. So if you run into that situation, or maybe it's a for sale by owner and they don't want to pay the buyer's agent, you just told your buyer over here that they don't have to pay you anything for your services. I know most of us don't want to work for free. So you need to make sure you put something in here, because while typically the seller side listing firm pays your compensation, it's not mandatory that you get paid. For sell by owner doesn't have to pay you. There are different situations where that might happen. So you can let your client know that typically the other side pays, but there may be some situations where there's no compensation. Again, a FSBO could potentially be no compensation, or it could be a 1% commission, and you expect to be paid a minimum of 2% or 2.5% or 3% or whatever. You need to have that conversation with your buyer that this is the amount we expect to be paid for services. Typically, the other side pays it, not always. If that is the case, then you will be responsible for paying the commission. Make sure they understand that. But also let them know that you will let them know if that's going to be the situation before going under contract. So some buyers will just pass on a house if you're not going to get paid because they don't want to pay. And then other buyers, they're fine with that. That's fine. We'll pay the commission. We don't mind. You're working. We want to get the house, whatever. So you need to be more clear in this section. You don't want to get to closing and find out your commission was nothing. So just a side note, because I do see that a lot. And I do understand that with the dual agency part, but as far as the buyer's fee, please make sure you have something in there. Make sure they understand the situation, what could potentially be. That's my suggestion if you want to get paid at the end of the day. So my information is pre-filled. Firm license number, please always have the firm license number in here. Mine doesn't pre-fill anymore. It's 719. So Lantern, I believe that should be the firm license for all of our locations. So all of you should have the same firm license number. So just make sure that's in there. And then same thing, you can tell it save, you can share it with your client, you can rename it, whatever you feel like. There are other things that we can do. There we go. Okay, so say we have, it doesn't matter, offer to purchase, buyer agency, whatever, and we need to make a correction to it. I'm going to tell this to make a copy. Once somebody signs a document in Dotloop, Dotloop is, those signatures are live. Okay, so once they sign it, you'll see it show up in green. If you try to touch or alter that document, it will stop you and it will warn you that if you continue, it's basically going to wipe out all of the signatures on the form. And you don't want to do that with an agency agreement. You don't want to do that with, with a number of documents. So if it stops you and says that, you need to tell it, never mind, you made a mistake, to keep those signatures in place. And at that point, come out. Like I said, if it pops up a warning box, just please take a second to read it. We don't want to open it. I'm not going to rename it right now. I don't need to do any of these other options. So if you don't want to see something, just hit archive, it hides it. You can bring it back, but I'm going to tell it to make a copy. If it says copy it as a Dotloop document, that keeps all those signatures live. Okay, so that means the copy is going to look just like the original. So if you do want to wipe out the signatures for whatever the purpose is on the copy, that's fine. That's up to you. But I don't want to wipe out the signatures. I want to keep them because I only want to make a change here or there. So I'm going to tell it to copy as a flat PDF. Okay, see how it says not editable? It's signatures preserved. So no problem. I don't want to put it in templates. But I do want to put it in a loop, and it's going to say, what loop do I want to put it in? I see it up at the top. If you don't see it at the top, no big deal. Just type it in here, find your loop. So that's the folder. If I had more than one folder, it would list them all. So I'm going to select where I want it, and I'm going to tell it to copy. And now I have my copy. So the dark black is my copy. There's the 01 afterwards. If it's dark black, it basically means you haven't opened the document yet. If it's lighter, then you've already opened it. So I'm going to go in here. I don't want to get these confused. So I'm going to change it, and I'm going to call it whatever I did, whether I changed an expiration date or whatever. So you see this looks just like a PDF copy. We're pretending there's initials down here, and maybe we have an expiration date and we're going to change it. You're going to come up here, all these little options. So we're going to go over here to add. If we need to change this because maybe we didn't read it and didn't realize it said the term of the agreement begins on, and we were in a hurry, or we just weren't looking at it and we thought it said expires on, and we put December 23 instead of today, we're going to strike through that. Oh yeah, and I can adjust it and I can move it. It's like a few other documents, like when you're working and you can move your pictures and stuff. So I've got my little cross things. That means I can put it wherever I want. Okay, so if you drop it in the wrong place, it's no big deal. And if you find that magic button there, you can see, you can change it around. So we realized the date was wrong. So we're going to go in here. We're going to tell it to add a date. We're going to add a date, right? And we're going to adjust that. I just made a correction on a document that everybody's already signed. So what do I need to do? Everybody needs to initial it, right? Because we altered something that somebody already signed. So we're going to tell it to add initials. And at that point, you can change that. I probably am in the wrong place. Let me move it. Oh, hold on. Oh, so you cannot do that. See, it won't let me drop a field over another one. So if you run into that, that's fine. Just move it. And you can resize them. You can go itty bitty like that. Or you can make it really huge, but nobody wants to see initials like that. So we're going to make it small. I don't like to cover up writing. Sorry, these are my own little personal issues. I don't like to cover up writing. That is a little small though. And I'm going to assign a field because I want Jane to initial it. So I've just assigned her. And I'm going to sign it because I'm a party to this document. Right? And I can't cross it. So I'm going to make that one small. Itty bitty. And I need to initial it also because I'm part of this. And it says initial. I can go in and sign it now. Yep, that looks fantastic. Great, done. And then we'll send it to her. So please make sure you do this on any corrections you make. Save it, share it, send it back out. It's that simple. You can add signatures, but if I'm getting confused and I'm dropping stuff and I didn't mean to do that, it's no big deal. I just click on it. And once you click on it, this little X box pops up. You can get rid of it. And you can make a lot of changes that way. So let's see what else is on there. Checkbox, radio button. Yeah, so that is going to be how you update something. I'm going to stop and read it, share document. Don't have her email address, so I can't share it with her. Does anybody have specific questions? Because I know there's a whole lot more, but I know we are running over time. You can see what's going on. If you send something to Jane, or you send something to another agent and they're telling you they never got it and they never saw it, and you want to just kind of double check, you can hit your little dots over here. You can go down to the history of that document and you can see when I added it, it's time-stamped. You can see when I looked at it. You can see when I modified it. If I printed it or downloaded it or whatever, it will say that I converted it to a tamper-proof PDF copy or whatever the terminology is. So you'll be able to see. So if you do send something to somebody and they're like, no, but I never saw it. I mean, you can literally see they viewed it. If they made a copy, you will be able to tell as well. Not that we don't trust people, but sometimes people say they didn't see it because maybe they saw it and then they forgot or whatever, but you can pull that information. When I add a folder, it's just as simple as adding a folder and naming it, right? Offer docs. If I made that folder and I didn't mean to do that, I can archive it. Something to keep in mind. You cannot, right? You cannot delete a document. I updated the buyer agency, so I really don't want to stare at this one anymore, right? Because I just want it simplified. So I'm going to select this document. And I'm going to go over, and you can go to the top. You have options up here, but I'm going to go over to the side and I'm going to tell it to archive it. So what happens is it disappeared, right? But if that was the wrong document or I need to pull it back for whatever reason, I'm just going to tell it to show archived. And the super, super light gray, that's my archived document. So I can look through that and go, yep, that's the one I wanted. Didn't mean to do that, or I need to do whatever. I'm going to select it. And now it says unarchive. I'm going to hit unarchive. It brings it back to life. It's that simple. You cannot delete anything. So the only place you can delete a document is in templates. If you go to templates and you've created your own little template folder and you've added documents to it, you can delete documents from there. But once you've created a loop, you cannot delete the loop. You cannot delete the documents within it. If I click up here in buyer documents, it closes the folder, right? It is literally just like a folder in real life. You close it, you don't see the messy papers inside. You click on it, it opens up that folder, and there's all the documents that are in that file. Dotloop works the same way. So if you know you have documents in there and you don't see them, don't freak out. Just come click on it and see if all you did was close the folder. But if I don't need that folder because whatever reason, then I'm just going to archive it. Yep, hide archived. Okay, so now I don't have to stare at it. You can do the same thing with your loops. If I'm done with Jane, we've already closed our transaction, or she moved out of state or decided to use a different realtor, whatever. She couldn't get pre-approved. I don't know. I'm just going to hit archive. And then next time I refresh my screen, she should be gone. She's gone, right? It's that, I say it's that simple. If you're not used to Dotloop, it's just a matter of just getting used to it, and then it will be that simple. But I mean, that's your basics. There is more to it. I know that people probably have questions. If you do, just reach out to me. If you want to sit down because you have more specific questions, you want to know how to do something or whatever, just let me know and we'll meet up. We'll sit down and we'll go over whatever you need to. I'm fine with that. Like I said, I'm sure, well, I know there's more to it. There's different things you can do, but this is just kind of your basics for now. Let me know if you have any questions, but if you need any additional help or different help, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to meet you down here, or we can do it via Zoom or whatever. But I appreciate everybody being here that's here. Does Nellie, you have a question? Or is your hand still up?
Yes, I do have a last question.
Okay.
Is that class for the business planning on April 18th? Is that still a thing, or is there any confirmation for that class?
Yeah, yes, it is. The vendor that's doing that for us, she just had issues trying to get in contact with the proper place to get it set up. So she just emailed me yesterday. It is set for April 18th at 6 p.m. It is at the Concord Fire Department off Poplar Tent and Ivy Klein. So it's literally just off the exit. They have a nice event room. So I will be sending out that information, but yeah, that is still, it is a go.
Is that one gonna be, can it be through Zoom too? Or is that just the in-person only?
That's just the in-person because of the vendor that's doing it for us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay, well, I appreciate it. I'm going to, oh, well, let me do that from there. Stop recording.